Hey, I'm Jenny Davis, and thank you for joining us for the ABA Journal's 10 Questions Live, our monthly conversation with innovators, interrupters, and just plain interesting lawyers. I'm here today with Keith Porcaro. He is Head of Technology and Development and also General Counsel for SIMLab. SIMLab is a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit that specializes in creating technology systems and solutions for other nonprofits. Now, recently, Keith has been focused on the issues involving the delivery of legal services through legal aid organizations and using technology to tackle the problems facing these organizations, from reaching out to people and helping them figure out exactly what issues they might even have, to getting people to show up for appointments on time. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're also going to talk about how Keith got to where he is right now with SIMLab, and also how he used his law degree to travel the world helping some of the globe's most disenfranchised people solve their life issues. And if you'd like to read the print version of our discussion, it is in the June issue of the ABA Journal, and you can find that archived at abajournal.com. And if you have any questions for Keith and you are tuning in to us live, please submit those to the email address below in the footer, and that is 10questionslive@abajournal.com, and we will try to get your questions answered on the air. So without further ado, welcome, Keith. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So before we delve into legal services and all the issues involved in that, I wanted to ask you to tell us a bit about SIMLab. What is it and what does it do?
Sure. So SIMLab is a nonprofit technology consultancy, and the long version of our mission is that we help organizations use technology to make systems and services more accessible and responsive and resilient. And the way that I usually like to describe it to people is we help people with the human side of technology. So we don't do a lot of software development in-house, but helping organizations think about how to plan a technology solution, how to think about their problems, from information architecture to organizational processes. We help them do trainings and documentation and evaluation. And we work mostly internationally, and in the last couple of years we started to do a bit more work in the US.
So I know in our print conversation, we opened with talking about a project that you have been working on for several years in rural India, where you were helping this province digitize land records and then deliver those records to the people in sometimes very rural surroundings. If you wanted to, we've had some readers ask, what's the status of that project right now?
Yeah. So we're 2 years into a project that was originally going to be 3 years, and looks like we're going to tack another year or so onto it. And so it's kind of in an interesting transitional stage. The project is in Odisha, which is a state in East India, and what we've been doing is helping the government sort of keep better track of a process to identify landless villagers in rural and tribal areas and then deliver title to them. And so we've been doing that for a few years and sort of have been adjusting the project as the government has changed the program a little bit. And so what we're doing now is sort of exploring whether there are sort of other opportunities to help streamline the land process. Whether it's helping people in other provinces with a similar sort of titling process, but also helping sort of the government deal with land as like a dynamic system, right? So as titles change over time when people move or die or inherit land, and also just kind of getting people to think more about what having land means and what having land sort of means in terms of how you ought to behave in order to take advantage of a system like that. So we're excited to see.
What's the benefit for the people of having this in place?
Sure. So for having land title is economic security is really sort of the benefit. So in a few places in Odisha where land may be sort of under dispute, having a piece of paper that is sort of authorized from the government that says this person actually has land is often kind of a way to head off disputes of other people coming to try and claim a plot that someone might just be squatting on. But it's also sort of necessary for most people who are receiving title. In this case, it's their kind of by far their largest economic asset, and so they can use that to get utilities and agricultural subsidies and just sort of use it as an economic foundation. And in order to do that, it's important to not only have the title in the first place, but kind of keep it up to date and sort of continue to have that as an ongoing process with the government.
So let's dive right into legal services.
Sure.
I know that you're working on a case study right now on how best to connect people with services. Can you explain a little bit about what this means conceptually, and then some of the ideas that you have and how they would be implemented?
Sure. So we've been working kind of for the last year and a half with a handful of legal service providers and a handful of social service providers. And one of the more interesting questions that we've kind of dealt with is intake. So kind of how do people realize that they have a problem that can be solved by a service? How do they go and find out services that are available to them? And how are they matched appropriately to them? And sort of how does that all work sort of as a system and not just as an individual looking for help? And so we did a project with the DC Public Library about a year ago that sort of looked at how the library can function and contribute to this system, and have sort of been doing a lot of writing and thinking about that since then. And so some of the work that we've done is around sort of helping organizations who provide help from thinking sort of from a broader systemic point of view. So how does somebody not just kind of get the one service that they might be looking for, but the 3 or 4 or 5 services that they might actually need. So like if I lost my job, chances are I probably need more than just assistance finding a job. I might also need rental assistance and food assistance and utilities assistance and sort of all of this networked web of services that may be provided by different providers. And so we think that there's sort of 2 really interesting opportunities. One is kind of an opportunity to help get a sense of what the overall health of the system is. So if I have a given problem, I'm likely to need this web of services. It's likely to cost, sort of this much in resources from these 3 or 4 providers. And we think that it will likely lead to this outcome. And so that a decision maker might be able to look at this entire system and say, well, this is where I need to put more resources, even though the entire system is under-resourced. And the second is that, and this is sort of something that we actually just put an article about called Making Public Services Explorable, but is using intake forms as not just sort of a form where somebody types in information, hits a button, and then hopes for an answer, but rather that they can use that form as a way to sort of explore what the eligibility rules are and how changing different information will sort of change the output that they get a little bit more interactively, so that when somebody goes and tries to find help, we can use it as an opportunity to teach somebody about how to navigate the legal system.
Now, tell me specifically about the Bay Area Legal Aid project that you're working on.
Sure. So we've been working with Bay Area Legal Aid through a grant from Legal Services Corporation for about a year now, and we've been working with them on a couple of projects. And one, kind of the bigger one, is using SMS and integrating that into their legal access lines. So when people call into the legal aid line, they'll either get an appointment for at a Bay Area Legal Aid office, or they'll get an outside referral. And at the same time, Bay Legal kind of is looking for better ways to follow up with people and sort of ask how their experience has been going. And so we created an integration with their case management system so that people who are running sort of this legal access line can create appointment reminders for clients after getting permission, of course, and then sort of do automated follow-ups to just get a sense of what people's experiences have been like. And then we're also sort of exploring a couple of other interesting use cases that are a little bit kind of early to talk about, but one might be around their youth justice program, and another one might be around sort of emergency communication with staff members in the event of an earthquake or something.
That's cool. That's cool. When you get when you're invited in on a project and you come in, I know sometimes the problem that people think that they have isn't always the problem that you find out they eventually have, or that there's not always a correlation between problem and solution. Is there a rubric that you use, or any kind of a standard way that you approach a project to drill down and find out what's going on? I mean, is it as easy as just talking to the people there?
It's I guess not as easy as talking to the people there, but that is a big part of how we do it. So kind of SIMLab does 2 sort of types of projects. One is sort of the more organizational, high-level kind of strategy project of helping an organization figure out kind of the ins and outs of its technical needs and how it should approach technology. But the more common one is sort of what you were mentioning, which is an organization might come to us with a discrete ask of helping solve a particular problem. And so we borrow a lot of tools from our work doing international development and do something called context assessments. So we'll do a lot of interviews with people, particularly people who are actually executing the work, rather than sort of leadership who might have an organizational look at it. And we try to...
way of describing how the gap between the workers and the...
It's important because people have different perspectives, and sometimes it may just be that you've got to clear, the intimidating manager out of the room just so that you can talk honestly with folks about kind of the gritty bits of what they do. And what we try to do in a lot of this work is sort of separate. There's a tendency to sort of look at technologies as black box, and what we try and do is sort of demystify that. But also, most of our clients, their technology problems aren't really technology problems, right? In the sense that the thing that they're trying to solve from a pure, just kind of technical point of view, has been solved somewhere in some domain. And so, what we're trying to really identify is sort of what sort of problem is this? So, is it an information architecture problem, or an organizational process problem, or a training or a documentation problem, or or something else entirely? And so, a lot of our job is to find that, and we try to structure the work that we do so that we've got sort of time to find the question. In addition to actually solving the problem.
So along those lines, how long does something like this take? Is there any kind of I guess two parts. Number one, how long is there any kind of a set time that they can expect to solve these problems and implement a process that will solve the problems or address the problems? And my second part of the question is, how long does it last? I mean, my iPhone won't even last 2 years, sure. And these are finite solutions, I guess?
Yeah, so those are both good questions. The type of engagements that we do, they tend to vary. They're always finite in length, right? There's not that many of us, and we're consultants, and so it might be the shortest version. The shortest engagement we might do might be kind of a half-a-day workshop or a 2-day workshop to kind of help build an RFP, which is basically helping if somebody wants to do a technology project but they're not sure what. But they want to hire somebody and they're not sure sort of how to describe what they want, we can help build those specifications and work with the organization to sort of get a better sense of how to manage a software developer. And then the long projects that we have that are grant funded can last 3 to 5 years. And to sort of the second part of your question, for us the engagement is finite, but the goal for the work that we do is to really ensure that the client can feel an ownership over the piece of technology that they use, right? So that it's totally okay that at some point in time they'll need to modify the tool, or they need to move on from the tool, and a client needs to really feel empowered to do that and empowered to sort of make that judgment. And that's not always easy. Kind of technology creates processes that live on outside of tech. If you sort of ask people who are maybe not quite as tech savvy, everybody has their own sort of weird workarounds for doing a specific task, and those are difficult to unpack. But we try and help people feel a little bit more comfortable with this, not as some sort of mystery, but as an integrated part of the work that they do.
And talking about funding, how are some of these projects that you're working on, how are they funded?
So we're a 501c3, which makes us a little bit easier in terms of how we get funded. I would say probably 80 to 90% of the work that we do is grant funded. So a grant, whether it's Google.org or the European Commission, or at one point the Hewlett Foundation, will make a large grant to maybe us and other organizations to work on our project together. And then the rest of the work, is we could get small sort of prototype fund grants. So the DC Library project, for instance, was funded by a grant from the Knight Foundation. But the remainder of the work is sort of direct consulting. So we'll do a task and invoice a client, and they'll pay us.
We had a reader question about some of these tech solutions that you're creating for legal aid, or some of the technology solutions you're thinking about for legal aid. Is there an application, do you feel, for lawyers doing low bono work? For example, just general lawyers who are helping regular people with affordable legal services?
Totally. I think there totally is. And it's kind of in there are two ways to maybe think about it. One way to think about it is that a lot of what we do with organizations is kind of organizational capacity building, so helping them do more with the resources that they have, right? So an appointment reminders via text message, for instance, could be for a legal aid organization, it could be for a clinic, it could be for low bono, it could be for sort of anybody, so those types of practices are, I think, definitely applicable to low bono work. And the other is just sort of how we think about law and technology generally. So we sort of think about software and technology projects in terms of we're building systems of information. So somebody comes and delivers a piece of software, some information, and the piece of software transforms that information according to some rule and then outputs some other piece of information, and then you go off and do something with it. And legal systems and lawyers sort of work the same way, although they're slightly less mechanical about it. Somebody will tell you a story that might be unstructured, and then based on your knowledge and based on case law and statutes, you'll think about it and apply structure to that story and maybe ask more questions. Is that issue spotting? Is that? It's kind of issue spotting. That's kind of what software is. And so, law is very much a structured way of thinking, and technology is very much a structured way of thinking. And I think that they have more in common than they do differences. There's not kind of a strict sort of logical construction necessarily in law as there is in software, right? Because if there's something that's illogical about a piece of software, it will break, and law will just kind of keep continuing with the contradiction.
Microsoft will send us a fix, right? That will fix everything.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they aren't as good. The patching in law isn't as good.
Yeah. So we had another reader question. What is one of the most creative tech solutions in legal services that you have come across, or that maybe you've created yourself?
One of the more interesting ones that I read about was actually in India. So we didn't work on this, but in India, it's kind of one of the popular sort of pieces of information about it is that the case backlog in some of the courts is about 365 years. Which is sort of astounding, and I'm not really sure how they calculated that. But one of the things that they did was they created sort of mobile courthouses that were basically on buses, and they would bring the courthouses sort of around and use that to sort of deliver legal services. I didn't. Judge bus? Yeah, like a judge bus or something. I think the creative uses of tech, they're usually not sexy ones, right? It's usually not sort of some like amazing app. I try to tell lawyers like, unless you're Henry VIII, like nobody's going to be downloading a divorce app. But they're usually ways to kind of find and repurpose sort of existing, older pieces of technology, and those tend to be really effective. I mean, in a project that we ran that didn't have anything to do with legal services, but was sort of getting feedback for people on maternal health. This was in Somaliland. The most effective piece of tech that we used was actually a suggestion box that we put in villages, because people would get together and talk about the issues that they had, and even if some folks weren't literate, they would still be part of that discussion. And then the suggestions that they produced were more actionable, and that was what you really needed.
Now, let me ask you a couple questions. Actually, we just had a reader question.
Sure.
Our admin, could you pop that back up, and I can read it? It was about what advice would you give someone who works with influential individuals who are in positions and who have the desire to battle systemic injustice or problems?
That's an interesting question.
I did see Deadpool, so maybe.
I guess I would have two sort of thoughts. I think one is, and I'm sorry that I usually have thoughts in pairs. It just happens. But for sort of me personally, what's really helped, as I've sort of gone along in my career, is sort of continuing to chase things that like I find personally interesting. So like there are so many systemic problems, and they're so big, and people spend their careers trying to unpick them. And I think that what can be really effective is sort of is individuals who are really focused on sort of small pieces of this system, and really kind of helping people who are new to the system, or helping clients like kind of optimize within it. It turns out we should actually probably change how eligibility is determined for legal aid, for instance. But in the meantime, what we can do is make it so that clients have as good an understanding of eligibility and legal aid as they can. And the second, I think, is kind of continuing to question existing processes. Legal kind of systems in the U.S. are very process-driven. We have a sense of if somebody goes through these steps, then it's likely that they will receive what we consider to be a procedurally fair outcome. And I think that there's sometimes a tendency to just kind of accept parts of the process as being okay. And it's the example that I tend to use is expungement. There's a lot of attention paid toward expungement applications now. And that's great, and for when it's connected to lawyers who can process that, then that's really helpful. But in a lot of states, expungement, not all of them, but in a lot of states, expungement doesn't require any sort of judicial discretion. As long as you sort of fulfill the requirements, you can do it. You can get your record expunged. So the question then is, instead of making an app, shouldn't we be pushing for this policy to be automatic? And how can we make those entitlements sort of be automatic? And then that's a policy change, right? Rather than just like taking a process and making it digital.
Let me just ask, you're a lawyer, you're a software developer, and I think at one point you told me that you were thinking about being a spy, maybe in college. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you get from going to China as an undergrad to working on tech solutions in India?
I don't think that I could. I think any explanation that I gave would sort of seem contrived. My resume probably is one that still raises eyebrows. It's sort of like, why are you doing all of these things?
Because they're interesting.
They're interesting, and that's sort of what for a lot of things is that I found sort of questions in them that I thought were interesting, and so I learned to code because there were interesting problems that I was trying to solve that I thought could be solved by learning to code and doing a thing. And I went to law school because I was interested in sort of how people how changing the rules of the game can impact how somebody lives their life, which is I admit like a very academic question to go into depth for. But it's all of these pieces, and I think all of these different skill sets are just different ways to solve problems. And so it happens that I was fortunate enough to stumble upon a set of problems I found really interesting, and to be at an organization that sort of let me do that.
And I know that you travel a lot for work to non-glamorous places. No offense to all those people that go to sub-Saharan Africa for an awesome travel, but I know that you go to some really glamorous places when you're off the clock, like Morocco and Croatia, and you've been kayaking in the Adriatic. So on our last question, because we're out of time, what's your next adventure? Where are you going?
So first, as a disclaimer, like it's only kind of the minimum amount of luxury that I can afford with mostly airline miles and slumming it in terms of a wallet. But I think the next place that I'll probably be heading is the Galapagos in October for a vacation. I have nothing useful at all to contribute to the Galapagos or climate change, but I'm excited.
And you probably bad Wi-Fi.
I really hope so. I really hope it's just awful internet connection. That'd be great.
Cool. Thank you so much, Keith, for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and I know our readers really have learned a lot and appreciate it also. And for everyone who's listening, if you've liked what you've heard today and you enjoy this program, please join us for our next 10 Questions Live. It'll be Thursday, July 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be talking with Robin Crawford. She's a young prosecutor in Florida, and she passed the bar at the age of 21. And we'll be talking to her about what she's doing, why she did it, and how she did it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and be well.